What if I told you that justice, in the hands of the British Empire, was a spectacle of terror, a tool not just to punish, but to control, humiliate, and break the human spirit? Imagine bodies torn apart in public squares, flesh shredded under the lash of the cat-o'-nine tails, and the slow, crushing agony of being pressed to death beneath mountains of stone. These were not acts of law. They were performances of power. In this video, we uncover the most disgusting and inhuman punishments inflicted under the guise of justice. But be warned, this is a history you may wish you could forget, shaping the empire's legal framework in ways few can comprehend. The Bloody Code, the foundation of cruelty. At the heart of these violent punishment methods lay the British Empire's infamous legal framework known as the Bloody Code, which was in effect during the 18th and early 19th centuries. Under this code, over 200 crimes were punishable by death, including seemingly minor offenses such as stealing bread, pickpocketing, or poaching. The British Empire's belief in deterrence through fear and terror was central to this brutal legal system. Philosopher Jeremy Bentham famously argued that the greatest happiness of the greatest number is the foundation of morals and legislation. However, this concept of deterrence was steeped in violence and inflicted widespread suffering on the empire's citizens and subjects. The cat-o'-nine tails, a whip of pain and control. One of the most infamous and visually recognizable instruments of punishment in the British Empire was the cat-o'-nine tails. This whip, which consisted of 9 knotted cords, was designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain, while ensuring that the recipient remained alive and conscious throughout the ordeal. It was commonly used in the British Navy, where sailors found guilty of offenses like insubordination, or in penal colonies such as Australia, where convicts were subjected to the lash as a reminder of their submission to imperial authority. The act of flogging with the cat-o'-nine tails was not just about punishment. It was a public spectacle. These floggings were often carried out in front of a crowd of peers, a form of public humiliation that served as a warning to others about the consequences of defying authority. Each strike of the whip would tear through the victim's skin, leaving deep, agonizing wounds that would often remain as lifelong scars. Some sessions of flogging involved dozens or even hundreds of lashes, depending on the severity of the crime. Public hangings, justice as entertainment. Another method of public execution in the British Empire was the public hanging. This form of punishment was a common spectacle, often drawing large crowds who gathered to witness the gruesome event. Executions were typically carried out in city squares, marketplaces, or near the sites where the crimes were committed, ensuring the full impact of the punishment was felt by the local population. These events were not just about delivering justice, but also served as a form of public entertainment, reinforcing the dominance of the law and the government. The condemned were often paraded through the streets in shackles, drawing attention to their disgrace and the authority of the state. Once they reached the gallows, a clergyman would deliver last rites, and the executioner would read aloud the crimes of the accused, underscoring the justification for their punishment. However, executions were not always swift. Prior to the introduction of the long drop method in the 19th century, many condemned individuals suffered prolonged deaths by strangulation. Public hangings continued throughout the 18th and early 19th centuries, but by the late 1800s, they were gradually abolished in Britain, in part due to growing public concern over their dehumanizing effects. The shift reflected broader reforms in the justice system and a movement toward more private executions, signaling a shift in attitudes toward punishment. Execution by firing squad, a military tradition of discipline. Execution by firing squad was another method employed within the British military, particularly for soldiers convicted of desertion, cowardice, or mutiny. Unlike the other forms of execution, firing squads were typically carried out in military settings, emphasizing the rigid discipline and expectations of loyalty within the British Armed Forces. The condemned soldier was usually blindfolded and tied to a post, while a line of soldiers aimed their rifles at the target. To alleviate the moral burden on the soldiers, one of the rifles was loaded with a blank, ensuring that no one soldier would know who delivered the fatal shot. Firing squad executions were often used during wartime, particularly in World War I, when hundreds of British soldiers were executed for desertion or disobedience under the stress of trench warfare. Many of these soldiers, later believed to have suffered from what was then called shell shock, now understood as post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, were executed despite the possibility that their actions were a result of psychological trauma. The Scavengers Daughter, the torture of compression. Though not as widely used as some other forms of punishment, the Scavengers Daughter remains one of the most terrifying torture devices associated with the British Empire. Used primarily at the Tower of London during the medieval and early modern periods, it was designed to inflict extreme pain by compressing the victim's body into an agonizing position. The device consisted of a series of iron bands that encircled the victim's body and were gradually tightened, causing intense pressure and contortion of the limbs. The Scavenger's Daughter was often employed on political prisoners, individuals accused of treason, or those suspected of disloyalty to the crown. In contrast to the rack, which stretched the body, the Scavenger's Daughter forced the body into a state of crushing compression, often resulting in broken bones, internal injuries, and death. Drawing and quartering. The ultimate punishment for treason. For those convicted of high treason, the British Empire employed one of the most brutal and horrifying punishments: drawing and quartering. This punishment, reserved for those who defied the crown, was designed to send a clear message about the consequences of treason. The process began with the condemned being tied to a horse and drawn, through the streets in a humiliating display of public shame. Once at the execution site, the victim was hanged but not allowed to die, leaving them conscious and aware of their fate. Following this, the condemned person was dismembered, quartered, with their body divided into 4 parts, which were often displayed at prominent locations like city gates. Transportation to colonies, a fate worse than death. Another form of punishment in the British Empire was the transportation of criminals to distant colonies. This method was used extensively between the 17th and 19th centuries as a way of ridding Britain of its criminal population, while simultaneously providing labor for its colonies. Convicts were often sent to remote locations like Australia or the Americas prior to the American Revolution, where they were subjected to harsh conditions and forced labor. The journey itself was a punishment, with convicts crammed into overcrowded ships, where they endured disease, malnutrition, and abuse. Many died during the voyage, with mortality rates often exceeding 25%. Upon arrival, convicts were forced into hard labor, working on farms or in infrastructure projects under harsh conditions. Pressing to death. The ultimate coercion. In earlier periods of British legal history, a particularly brutal punishment known as pressing to death was used against individuals who refused to enter a plea in court. Known as peine forte et dure, this punishment involved laying the accused on their back, placing a wooden board on their chest, and gradually adding heavy stones or weights. The weight would increase until the victim's body was crushed under the pressure, often resulting in slow, agonizing death. One notable case of pressing occurred in 1586, when Margaret Clitheroe, a Catholic martyr, chose not to enter a plea when charged with harboring Catholic priests during a period of Protestant rule. She was subjected to pressing under a door loaded with heavy stones, and she died within 15 minutes of the ordeal. This cruel form of punishment was meant to force the accused to submit to the authority of the court, but many chose to endure the pain rather than comply. The punishments employed by the British Empire during the height of its power are chilling reminders of the brutal methods used to maintain control and assert authority. While some of these practices have long been abolished, they stand as stark examples of the extremes to which the British legal system once went. These extreme forms of punishment challenge our understanding of justice and human resilience, and they offer valuable lessons about the dark corners of history we must never forget. History may have moved on, but the dark legacy of these punishments serves as a reminder of the extreme societies once went to in the name of law and order. Let us know in the comments which punishment shocked you the most, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more deep dives into the shadows of history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.